Hey friends, my name's Georgie. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Just Breathe podcast, where I'll be talking all things breathing to help empower you guys to use the power of your breath to harness your bodies and minds. In today's powerful conversation, I'll be chatting to the legend that is Dan Edwards. Dan is one of the creators of what is now the global organisation Parkour Generations. Parkour Generations is the leading authority on parkour education with their ADAPT Qualifications, Parkour for Schools and Parkour Fitness programs. Now the officially accredited certifications for parkour across the world. Dan was so incredibly generous in sharing his journey into parkour with me, as well as how parkour not only helped him to develop his physical strength, but also to develop his mental resilience as well. We also got chatting about how brilliant breathwork is to help to get into that flow state that really enhances sports performance. This was such a powerful conversation, and I hope you get as many insights from it as I did. A little bit of housekeeping. If you haven't already, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the Just Breathe podcast. Let's keep on building that strong breathing community. The more people talking about breathing, the better. All right, let's crack on with this incredibly powerful conversation. I hope you feel inspired and motivated to get moving by the end of the conversation. I certainly did. This is episode 22 of Just Breathe with Dan Edwards. Hey Dan, how's it going?
Very good, thanks, Georgie. And you?
Yeah, really good, thanks. Awesome to have you on the podcast. Thank you so
Pleasure
much.
to be here.
Thanks for coming and chatting to me. It's really exciting. I've seen a lot of your stuff. We were just talking about your talk at the Heroes Roundtable, which was awesome. And I've seen a few other bits of talks you've done. And I love the way we were just saying before. I love the way you don't take it too seriously when you're on that stage. You sort of jumping around, like a kid, which is how we all should be, I think, really.
Yeah, I mean, I've sat through many talks and speeches in my time, and the boring ones, you don't want to be that guy. So I like to try and make it a little bit more entertaining, because I've been on the receiving end of those talks and in academia and lectures or whatever. I've sat there for hours and been bored. So I don't want to bore people. Yeah, I like to give them some jokes in there.
Yeah. So you are the parkour guy, right?
I'm one of the parkour guys.
You
Yeah.
are the parkour guy. So how did that happen? When did parkour come into your life? Did you sort of, jump and run out of the womb? Like, was it a thing from birth, or did it find you?
I mean, in some ways, I suppose we were pretty active as kids, me and my brothers, but we had a very physical lifestyle growing up in the countryside.
Nice.
So I have three brothers, so it was every day was pretty much chaos and carnage and fighting and all that stuff. So so in a way, yes, I suppose I grew up sort of pretty physical, and also I grew up in the in the 80s, and back then, certainly if you were a young boy, then your idols and role models were kind of action heroes and martial arts stars and superheroes, and so all that sort of stuff was being, we were just in love with that stuff. So we kind of wanted to emulate those characters, and therefore we began training ourselves in skills. I started martial arts when I was very young, and carried that on through my whole life. And but it was that plus, just the adventure idea, the sort of survival skills, the practical, those sort of practical elements as well, that those heroes always seem to capture and be able to do anything that's needed at any time. This kind of idea of just being self-reliant and sort of and resilient and able to solve any problem with your own kind of two hands and your own skills, your own wit. That was kind of these action heroes in the 80s and the superheroes and the fantasy stories. Those characters always had that. So that's kind of what we wanted. Most of my friends probably outgrew that and became sensible adults, but I just never really, I just never dropped that stuff. So I just carried on training it, and it became more serious as I got older. And then, yeah, I didn't find parkour until, I mean, I was like 25 when parkour sort of appeared in the world. So I didn't find it until then, which is really late. Nowadays, that's super late. So, but when I found it, yeah, that was when, this was about 2000, and parkour was tiny then and really a fledgling fringe discipline with just a handful of people in the world doing it. And I discovered it and was just immediately drawn to it, and it became a big part of my training. And then it kind of took over my training, and then eventually became my career. So
it's amazing.
It's kind of a natural progression in some ways, but also in many ways completely unpredicted.
Yeah. I mean, and as well, like you said, with when you're a kid and you're aspiring to those superheroes that sort of just show up and they have all these incredible abilities, and they help people and they save the world, they make the world a better place. I guess actually though, in real life, it must hit home that actually takes quite a lot of work to even touch on what you see in those films, right? They don't show you the struggle that it takes to gain those skills, which I really admired in your talk at the roundtable speech, all about the idea of altruism, wanting to help, but the attribute as well of actually obtaining the skills to be able to be of use. And that's the bit that is really tough, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna, yes. Basically, at the end of the day, if you want to acquire these certain skills in life, any kind of useful skill, it's probably going to take you a while to get good at it.
But to an elite level, I guess we're talking about as well, because not saying parkour is always horrifically tough. I've done some parkour myself, and it's so fun. But anything to an elite level, I think we're saying, right, it's a journey.
Yeah, certainly to an elite level, yes. That's going to be years or decades of your life put into that. But even to just a useful functional skill that's going to help on a day-to-day basis, like for example, first aid. You can do a first aid course in half a day, and you'll go away with a certain amount of understanding. But if you want to get to the level where you're so good at it that you can actually help people with any situation you're in, you could just what to do, and bang, you don't panic, you solve it. That does take practice. It's not something that you just do a half-day course and leave it. So to become, that's why doctors are so valuable individuals, I guess, because they've got so much knowledge that when a bad situation occurs, is there a doctor in the house, and everyone relaxes when there is, because okay, this person's put in so much training, they're going to be able to solve the problem. And I think that anything like that is going to require discipline to get there. And again, that was part of the if I look back, part of our sort of self-given education when we were kids in the 80s was the martial art movies and things like Rocky and stuff like that, where there were always montages of people training for going through real hardship and training to become good, for a long period of time. So we also had that idea of, this is going to take time. I'm going to have to train to become good, and that might be months or years or whatever. So we also emulated that concept of putting in the work, because that was the role models we were given. So
and do you think there's a certain hunger actually that comes from putting in the work? The more you start to put in the work, it's almost like the more you strive to gain in terms of mastery and skill and stuff.
Yes, I mean, I think the more you go into any discipline, any transformative practice, any practice really, the more you go into it, the more you realize how much there is to go into.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming, can't it, sometimes?
Yeah, and if you like it, then you kind of realize, okay, wow, I thought this would be short and sweet, but actually I know nothing, and it's going to take me 5 years just to get this stuff sorted, and then another 5 years to get to here. And, it's there is an element of you're going to need discipline if you want to get good at anything. Yes, there are really efficient learning strategies, And nowadays, there's lots of the science of expertise and science of learning has gone into that a lot and helped us understand that you can actually get passably good at pretty much anything in a short time. You can at least know the basics and sort of be able to sort of get by in it with a short amount of very efficient learning, the kind of 80-20 rules and that sort of stuff. But the reality is it's still only sufficient. It's only a superficial level of skill that you acquire that way. And there are some skills, some practices that there is no shortcut. You must put in the time, and that's just the way it is. So, and any practice you go into, you're going to realize that is huge. And to achieve mastery is going to take time. I think once you've got to a good level in any discipline, it's like Musashi and Nagori in the show, The Book of Five Rings. That there's that concept of once you achieve mastery in one thing, you will be able to recognize mastery in everything else. So that means you will understand if you're really, really good at one thing, like you recognize that you may know nothing about these other things, but you recognize you now understand how much time it probably took those people to become masters in their discipline, and the complexity of their discipline probably rivals yours. So you then sort of see how mastery in all things is equally difficult, whether it's flower arranging, martial arts, parkour, carpentry, yoga, or whatever.
There's a certain respect there for sure.
Yes.
100%. I mean, for anyone listening, I'm sure everyone does know, but could you just sort of briefly go over what is parkour and the sort of basic principles of parkour itself?
Yeah, so I mean, most people have probably seen it now on TV and movies, and most people, that's how most people visualize it. They hear about parkour and they think, oh, that's those guys that jump from roof to roof and and swing on bars.
At first, I always thought it was free running. Are they two of the same, or is it different?
Yeah, so that's kind of a complicated answer in a way, but the short answer is yes, they're the same thing. They were originally different words at different stages of the development of parkour for the same discipline. So the first name for the art was l'art du déplacement, which is French and it means the art of displacement, or the art of getting from A to B, or the art of movement, however you want to translate it. That was the first name. Then the word parkour was used by one of the founding individuals decided to start using a different word, so he called it parcours, which comes from le parcours, the French word that means the course or the route, and he just sort of changed the spelling and made it a bit cooler, and he called it parkour. and then that was when it was in France, and then when they brought when we did Jump London, and three or four of the French practitioners came over here for Jump London, the Channel 4 documentary. One of the basically the production team were like, we kind of need an English name for it. So one of the guys involved in the French side of the production came up with the word free running and said, why don't we call it free run? That's this kind of has the right idea of the spirit of it, and that was used as a direct translation in Jump London, that documentary of Channel 4. And so if you watch the documentary, you'll see them say free running, it will translate it as parkour, or vice versa. So it was originally just a translation of the word parkour. And that over time, then the internet got involved and big debates about stuff or whatever for many years. And it then sort of became, some people misunderstood it to mean free running is kind of parkour plus the fancy stuff, plus the flips and the acrobatics. Right. So that free running is that, and parkour is just the pure stuff. This is historically not accurate. That's not the way it was. But that's, the internet took that and ran with it. So a lot of people now kind of see it that way. But historically, that's just different names for the same discipline. Yeah. So it was seen as that, and that's how most people saw it, as kind of roof jumping stuff or whatever. But the reality is, and if you train in it, then that stuff's just sort of the tip of the iceberg. And actually, parkour is a movement discipline. It's a discipline of self-improvement of the body and mind through functional movement, really, through practical movement skills, and through exploration and challenge and discovery in your environment, with the goal being to make yourself a better, stronger individual who can then help others. So a lot of the initial creeds and maxims in parkour right from the start were things like être fort pour être utile, which means be strong to be useful. So it was this idea of not just the founding guys of this idea of we're not just training to make ourselves better, we're training so that we have the skills and strength to be able to help our friends, our family, our social circle, our community if needed. So it was this kind of very utilitarian, in a way altruistic kind of motivations for training, which were at the core of parkour, and we definitely try to keep them there and teach all the new generations those ideas too. Yeah, super important for us.
Yeah, that is incredible. I love that. I had an amazing Pilates teacher that said, rather than moving to have a six-pack, you know, or have an Instagram body, as you know, it's so put forward now, why can't you just be someone that moves to make the world a better place, to improve your environment? You know, go pick up litter from the street, go you know, help someone carry their shopping bag, whatever. That's on such a basic level, but you know what I mean? I love that concept that is coming through more and more. And as someone who trains people in fitness myself as well, it's such, you know, be skilled for a purpose bigger than yourself is, I think, really what leads to mastery, because there's so much more than just you, right? And I love my very tiny experience of parkour. I loved the community aspects of it. I have to say, how everyone is training and they're training together, and it's, from what I could tell, pretty non-competitive, and everyone is there lifting each other up. And you're right, it seems about bettering yourself, because there really is that fear aspect there. I mean, even in the short couple things of jumping over walls and sort of going upside down, because it was running at like a brick wall already, there was a certain amount of fear there, for me.
Yes.
of you know, your mind goes through all of the scenarios that could potentially happen on the other side of that wall.
Yep.
But you've got this pumping feeling of adrenaline where you're like, I kind of want to do it though, just because I feel like I can. And that's got to be a massive part of parkour in terms of the fear aspect. How do you help people get over that?
Yeah, it's exactly right. Your description, I mean, probably everyone that takes up parkour, probably, you know, almost all of them have the same experience. They feel that sort of stuff. They most people look at parkour and go, that's, you know, I could probably do that. It's all right. And then when they try it and they're faced with just a 4-foot wall and we just ask them to get over it, suddenly they're like, wait a minute. Now they suddenly feel we're afraid, you know, and that's for adults. This is for adults, and that's quite normal, and it's really healthy. It's because they haven't done that stuff for so long, and it seems outside their sense of normality and what you're meant to do on a wall or a rail. So it challenges so many kind of preset notions of what you can do in your environment, and that's quite interesting to see people break through that mental block. So, and yes, the fear is something they face. At some stage, you will face it in parkour. You will face it probably very early on, and you will never stop facing it. So, in a way, what we do is we don't really. It's not really a question of helping people overcome their fear. It's more a question of helping people understand fear and understand it and realize it's not something I want to just crash through or push down or get rid of. You know, if you see me talk about it, you sort of see that our view is that fear is an emotion, and no one would tell you, you know, if any other emotions like anger or sadness or whatever, you should just suppress them. You should just ignore them and push them away, right? This is generally considered very unhealthy and for good reason. So why should fear be any different? Because it's an emotion. It's the same as them. So what you have to do with any such emotion is try to understand it, understand where it comes from, what's the cause of it, is it benefiting you or is it holding you back, and delve into it, become familiar with it. And in that process of understanding it, you learn to manage it, you create a relationship with it, and then it starts to serve you rather than to work against you. So that's what we encourage people to do. But you should never try to just like overcome it or you know, try and be free of it, because you're not free of it. And it's there for a very good reason. It's there to help you. You just have to learn to communicate with it rather than suppress it. So that's what we encourage people to do. And regular parkour practice really helps that. It really helps you get very familiar with that sensation of fear, and you kind of learn that you can manage it. And that's probably one of the most powerful benefits of parkour training, beyond all the kind of you'll get fit, strong and agile and mobile, and yes, you will. But this is a far more applicable, broadly applicable concept that you will take away from parkour that applies to more stages of your life than just physical fitness and strength. Yeah. So it's more important, I think.
Yeah, it's like befriending your fear. I'm really glad actually you sort of reiterated that you're right, it's not about overcoming your fear, or even if we go further, your whatever you're experiencing, your anxiety, your depression, whatever, you know, those walls that come at us in life that try and stop us from moving. But emotion itself, right, is energy in motion, it's emotion. And so I think it's so incredible with parkour that you literally are running at a wall and at the same time running at your mental wall that is,
Yes.
you know, everything trying to keep you safe, saying you can't do this when you've seen 5 people do it before you. So you're like, I think I can.
Yes.
Everything in my body is trying to pull me back, and that's an amazing thing. And of course, breathing, and we've talked about this in our chat before, massively comes into that. Your breathing so noticeably changes when you have that moment of fear, and it actually of course changes to try and stop you from doing or to prepare, you know, for you to either freeze or run away or fight it. So to, I suppose, help you get over that wall as well. But I suppose that adrenaline rush, is that always helpful in parkour? Is it better to be more in a state of calm? Because if you have too much adrenaline, might you go over the wall and then some, like way off into the car park?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, and that's another it's a really interesting subject, is the, you know, the idea of adrenaline and adrenaline sports and the reality of them, because, you know, anyone, if you talk to anyone that's kind of, you know, heavily into these, like what we would call lifestyle sports, or these sort of transformative practices like this, like the things that are currently are sort of thrown together normally, like parkour, you know, skateboarding, motocross, you know, wingsuiting, you know, all this sort of stuff. Everyone's like, my God, it's crazy. Yeah. The reality is, you know, the people that do them and get good at them, they're not adrenaline junkies. They don't have tons of adrenaline flowing through their body. They get to an elevated, they get to a primed state that they need to be in, just like an athlete. They get to an elevated state in terms of their physiology so they can perform this. So their focus is heightened, their awareness is heightened. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you know all about it, right? So they get into that flow state. But that's not the same as having loads of adrenaline. In fact, it's the opposite. For parkour, we definitely don't want adrenaline, you know, coursing through us when we're doing jumps, because we need very fine motor skills.
Yeah.
And with adrenaline, you lose that, you shake.
Yeah.
So we definitely don't have, you know, loads of adrenaline. So when people say, "Oh, you guys are adrenaline junkies," and that, which sometimes we get, you know, we're kind of like, we know this is absolutely the opposite. We're definitely most parkour practitioners, when you talk to them, when you see them training or practicing, especially before something that's taxing or challenging for them, they're very calm. They're normally super calm. They work it out. They check everything. They're very precise, very meticulous in their preparation, and then they'll control their breathing, set their mind, and then they do it when they're ready. It's not at all a case of like amping yourself up with adrenaline and high-fiving and then going for it. That just does not happen in parkour. Not anyone that's any good or has trained for any amount of time anyway.
No. It's similar actually. From what I watched, I was with some guys training in Melbourne in Australia, and from the guys that I watched, it was almost like watching them line up you know, a snooker ball in snooker, that amount of calmness of just like, okay, and then they go, and everyone is there supporting them, ready to catch them, you know, not literally, because that would be dangerous, but sort of, you know, just rooting for them, but without pumping them up, which I love. Because if we go to something like CrossFit, and I have nothing against CrossFit, I think it's awesome, but even that in itself is quite a more, go, which I think a lot of people, like you said, mistakenly associate parkour with, whereas actually, because it is a mastery of the body and the mind, and of actually just functional movement and being quite efficient and precise in your movement, it's actually a really calming practice, even though from the outside people are doing quite physically incredible things. Like those jumps always astound me, how far people can jump. But I suppose it's that hyper focus.
Yeah, it's exactly, it's the flow state. As you know, this is what we seek in parkour, and anyone that trains in it. And the reason the community is so supportive of each other in those situations, that training modality is very common in parkour. That group training modality anyone that trains in parkour knows that they know the feeling of what it's like to do these jumps and to do these movements and to need that complete focus, complete control. So they know it. So they know what the other person needs, and they don't want to distract them from that. They don't want to encourage them to do it before they're ready, because you wouldn't want anyone encouraging you to do it before you're ready. So it's a very supportive in that way, because everyone's like, we know exactly what he or she is going through right now up on that wall. So we're not going to rush them. We're not going to, we're not going to shout and cheer. We're just going to support them, give them anything they need, any help they need. And when they do it afterwards, we'll celebrate they did the move. That's great. Everyone's happy. But no, beforehand, there's a really supportive community. So yeah, it's not competitive in that way. Basically because everyone knows what it takes. Everyone knows the focus it requires. So everyone's very supportive of everyone else. And it's a very humble community in that way, which is really, really cool. Yeah, something we really love about parkour. And hopefully it'll always stay that way. So.
Yeah, for sure. What was your experience of that first big jump that you did? Because I know I heard you talk about it in a talk, so I know there's a story there. And I was wondering if we could touch on it a bit, because it was just brilliant, like listening to that experience. I thought you described it so well. So if you're willing to share.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know how much of a story it is, but it's and it wasn't now. If I looked at it now, went back to it now, it wouldn't be considered a big jump. No one would say it's a big jump now.
It's funny, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, when I did it then, that was the first time. So it was pretty much my first or second time training parkour. Maybe I think I was in Japan actually with a friend, and our knowledge of it was very basic, because there was no way to get knowledge of it back then. This is before YouTube, but there was no classes, no teaching, no websites, nothing. So it was very limited knowledge that I had from some contact with the French founders and sort of a couple other people in the UK. We'd sort of taken it up. But we were basically finding our way, trying to just sort of, find out what worked and what we could do, and emulating some of the streamed videos online. Whatever.
Yeah.
But there were very few of the French founders. So, and there was, we were just out training in the town I lived in Japan, and there was a sort of pedestrian area where there's a wall, there's a gap, there's a gap, and you can walk sort of under that overpass, or you could jump across to the other side. That's how I saw it anyway. So I saw that I could jump across the other side. It's probably 15, 20 foot off the ground. And I could jump across and catch the railing on the other side. My feet would land on the wall in what we now call a cat leap or an arm jump, and then I would climb up. And I could see that, like, I could sort of see it. I could see that I could probably, if I jumped, I could visualize that I'd make it. I thought I'm probably strong enough to catch that bar and pull myself up. I went around and checked the bar on the other side and was like, yeah, okay. So I was like, yeah, I could probably jump that. And then as soon as I started thinking that, the fear process kicked in and was like, wait, do you realize, it's kind of your brain starts going, wait a minute, if you don't make it, or and all the things that could go wrong start kicking in, right? And this is your brain trying to persuade you not to do it in a way. Yeah. So it's the fear bit that's just checking, basically saying, well, if you bounce off and you fall, it's a long fall. You could end up breaking your arm, breaking your leg. You sure want to do that? So all these things sort of come in, and I kind of stepped back and was like, okay, I realize now that this is, a visceral fear. I got very used to martial arts and fighting. I was living in Japan in order to study those arts and fight and whatever. And so I kind of was quite used to fear in my own sphere. I didn't really get afraid anymore. I hadn't been afraid for a while. Yeah. So I was kind of like, wow, this is what it's like to be afraid, like properly afraid. You can feel your heart going. And I was like, but I know I can do it. So my options are, do I just step down and walk away? There's no one watching. There's no points. No one cares if you do it or not. The rules don't care if you jump. So no one's going to care. You can just walk away. But part of me is like, yeah, but if you do that, you will know that there was something here you could do, but you chose not to do it out of fear. You let fear win, and that's not you guiding your decisions. You're not in charge. Fear is in charge here. So do you want to be in charge, or do you want your fear to be in charge? That was the question. Wow. And I was like, well, I kind of want to be in charge. So okay, so I'm going to try and do it. So I built the process up and did it. And yeah, when I climbed up on the other side, I was like, okay, this is awesome. That feeling of like, that feeling of self, that true feeling of self-mastery, and a real thing. That was the important thing for me, was that, because I grew up studying martial arts, and I was involved in tournaments when I was younger, but very quickly I got bored of those because I knew there was just kind of sports and things like that. It didn't interest me. And then there's a lot of crap in martial arts about what, all this talk about, all this macho stuff about, this, I can kill 100 people with one touch or whatever. And people, blow stuff up in their mind. And a lot of it's rubbish. And whereas, so there's a lot of sort of pretense and faking and stuff like that. Not in all that, just a lot of great arts, obviously. But whereas this was like, okay, this is real. There is no faking this. There's no pretending you can do it or you can't do it. Either you can do it or you can't. And there's no you can't wear a black belt of parkour, and say, no, look at this. I'm great at parkour because it's like, well, can you do it? Can you do these jumps? Yeah. Whereas you can't be tested in martial arts. It's very hard to be tested in that way unless you go into the cage or something. It's very hard to be tested in that way. So it felt to me like this is a real use of my skill, an actual practical use of my body and my mind. Like, what can my body and my mind do in real terms, in the real world, on an environment that isn't built for it? There's no mats, no padding, it's not a sport. And that for me was immediately
no comfort. That's the thing that blew my mind. There's no comfort whatsoever.
No, and I love that. I was like, this is an honest discipline, and this is something I'm going to train forever. As soon as I climbed up in that wall, I was like, I'm probably going to do this forever now.
I love it.
It just went on.
Oh, that's
it was good. It was good. It was a good day. No, not every day is like that, but that was a good one. Yeah.
That's a wicked story. Thank you so much for sharing. Honestly, that's really cool.
And anyone who goes through parkour is going to have that. They're going to have that moment early on, probably, where you probably did, where you were like, "Oh yeah, wait a minute, but jump between these two walls."
With the most pathetic jump you've ever seen.
I'm sure you thought it was pathetic, but I'm sure it wasn't. We also have this phrase that there's no easy jumps. We also have this idea in parkour. There's no easy jumps because often you will, it's common in parkour for us to sort of be trying to break a jump in, we'll be there for 10, 20, 30 minutes and you're looking at it, you're working it out, as you probably experienced when you trained it, you're kind of building yourself up for it, you're trying to get the mental energy to do it. And it's huge in your mind. And then the moment you do it, you kind of go, oh, so easy. I can't believe I've made, and you then sort of go, it's such an easy jump, I can't believe it. But the reality is it wasn't easy. Yes, it was easy for you to perform it once you did the process and all the preparation, but that means it wasn't easy. That means it was a process. So, we try and encourage people, don't do yourself down by then just walking away going, oh, that was easy, I can't believe I made it so tough. It's like, because it was a process and you should respect that process. Yeah. So
to a smaller degree, interestingly, I think we do go through that process with a lot of things, like, before you go for a run or even out for a cycle. And I'm saying this because I'm an avid road cyclist and I love a bit of running. And I'm someone who would say I'm really into fitness, but I still have that moment before I go for a run where I go, oh God, okay.
Here I go.
That just moment.
Do I really want to? Yeah,
that moment where you contemplate the fact that you don't have to do this, but you're like, I could just not do it. And you're like, but then I wouldn't have done it. And I know
you would know.
I won't have that high that I get, or that great feeling of even just being out in fresh air, which as well, by the way, I think, especially for where the world is right now, parkour is so necessary in terms of teaching in a world of comfort that it's okay to be uncomfortable and to not be cushioned and matted and actually to fall over, right? And get a scratch once in a while. Like, that's okay. I think that's an important lesson.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if it's a generational thing or whatever. It's actually really interesting. I was on set today on a movie we were working on, and the head stunt coordinator, who's a super experienced stunt guy from, he's done loads of big films for the last sort of 20, 25 years. Yeah. He was saying, very, very interesting thing, even in the stunt world, he was saying there is a definite change in how, so, his generation, he said, they had it tough, really tough in the stunt world, and it was considered like, you would find a way to do it. You would find a way to do the stunt, and even if it kind of hurt, you'd be like, well, that's just the way it is. It's going to hurt. I sometimes think something's going to hurt. Doing the stunt where you fall down stair falls, which are quite hard to do, It's going to hurt. It doesn't matter how, because there's going to be a certain amount of pain. But he said there's a lot of new young stunt people now coming through who do their sort of sports qualifications and stunting 4 or 5 years. They have to do all the stuff they have to do to get stunt riders. But he said they then come onto set and you ask them to sort of, do a fall on concrete, and they don't want to do it. They're like, well, no, because can't I have a mat? Because it's going to hurt. It's going to give me it's going to maybe give me a graze or a bruise on. I don't want to do that. And he kind of looks at them like, you're getting into the stunt world.
Yeah.
You are going to get bruised.
You're the guy that gets hit by cars, or the girl, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. You're the person that does that, so that the lead doesn't have to do it. That's kind of your job. So, and he says this is, it was really interesting, fascinating, because he was saying like it's a weird thing for them, for older stunt generation, to look at these new people coming through who don't seem to want to get hurt doing stuff. They want to have the title of stunt person, but without realizing that. Oh, and obviously, no, some people want to get injured, and they're super good at not being injured. But they don't even want to feel the pain of a fall.
There's a scratch, and then no one wants anyone to ever get injured. But there's a scratch, and then there's a bit of pain that builds resilience, and
you need that.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, it begs me to wonder that, God forbid, are we going to be, a generation where our children, we actually don't even let them fall. We're catching them before they've been allowed to fall over. When falling over and eating dirt and all that, it's really important, isn't it? Because it really it builds you to learn to be a human being, because the more you are prevented from experiencing life, which when there is light there has to be dark, then you're just living in a bubble of fear, right? Because the world, I don't want to say the world is not a dangerous place, because there are horrible things that happen in this world that are 100% valid and are horrific, and and everyone should be safe in their own right, of course. But then there's the other extreme, and I wouldn't want to live in a world where I was afraid to run freely. Free running, right? The reality is, you're absolutely right. The reality, the world is a dangerous place. There are dangers and risks and stuff like that. And the reality is, if you try to protect someone from those while they're growing up, you are actually doing them a massive disservice, and you are putting them at a greater risk, because they will grow up being less competent, less confident. They won't be able to manage risk when it comes along, and it will come along, and therefore they are more likely to make a mistake or freeze or get hurt. So actually, you are preparing them for great risks by not preparing them for small risks as they grow up, or letting them experience those small risks. And this is a huge mistake. And, we see it, we travel the world a lot, teaching and working abroad and stuff. And we go to, the UK is not that bad now, but we go, certain countries we go to, for example, Hong Kong was like this, parts of the Middle East, where you see and they're aware of this, the people there are aware of this, the culture there has become so protective of their children, so much helicopter parenting and cotton wool, and that the kids are all really physically really incompetent. Like they cannot do basic skills like jumping, running, things like that. They can't do them. Wow.
They're all overweight. Well, not all, but a huge majority of them are overweight.
Yeah, of course.
Lacking in physical literacy, lacking in confidence, lacking in resilience. If they fall over and slightly bang their elbow in a sports class, they run to the nurse immediately, because they've been told to by their parents. It's not the kid's fault; it's the parents' fault, right? So, and when you see that, and we get asked to go in. And last time I was in Hong Kong, I had to go and see the ministers for education there, because they were like, "We're aware of this problem. How do we solve it?" They were like, "We are aware that our kids." And these generations of kids are growing up physically incompetent, physically illiterate, unhealthy, not strong mentally, and how do we solve that? So we kind of been in these big debates about like, well, the solution is kind of way bigger than us, because it's a cultural thing. But you can see how the UK could end up going that way.
Oh yeah.
I don't think we are. I think we sort of nipped that in the bud like 5-10 years ago. I think there was a time when we were going that way, and then we stepped back from it. And I think now there's a much more sensible approach to sport and fitness and health and education for kids.
Yeah, I agree.
But there are parts of the world that have gone down that road, and it is scary to see the kids. You're just like, wow. You ask a kid to jump, they just can't. They don't know how to jump.
And when you really,
that's crazy.
Well,
Yeah, that's scary.
it's really almost upsetting as well, because like, I mean, even I'm 25 now, and I skip down the road sometimes just for the joy of skipping. I think
Very good.
I think so many people should skip more. That is, one day I'm going to
It's
start
also a very efficient way to travel, actually. It's
really
quite
is.
efficient.
It's so fast. But anyway, skipping's great. But like, you know, jumping, and God, my dad is a like extreme sports fanatic, water sports, windsurf. I was thrown on a windsurfer when I was 5, and you know, like didn't really windsurf properly, just put the sail on the back and dived off it. But you know, all of these fun things where, you know, I grow up and I'm not scared of cold water, and I'm not scared of falling off my bike. I know I'll be okay, and all these different things, which is why when I was lucky enough to try parkour, I was like, oh my God, cool. What's that? And actually, do you think then this mollycoddling that happens, and thank goodness, hopefully, you know, we are heading out of it, but that does still happen in many countries, especially in the Western world, actually kills curiosity?
Yeah, I think it hugely limits creativity, curiosity, resilience, the adventurous spirit. You know, all those things become put aside in the name of, in the inaccurate name of, you know, what's safe and best for people and for children and stuff. And the reality is that, you know, if you study risk and you study health and you look at the science of these things, you realize that no, it is not safer to do those things. And all that means is you just don't understand risk and what it is, and what the actual risks are to people's lives. So, you know, the risks that risk is a huge, we're really into risk obviously as a topic, but risk is, you know, the risk that when people see what we do, they go, "Well, that's hugely risky and it's really dangerous. I would never do that." Whatever. So they, you know, a lot of people will go on about that. But you know, and then they will go to the pub that night and drink 7 pints and drive home drunk. You know, and we're like, well, let's look at the stats here. So, what's the world's biggest killer every year according to the World Health Organization? Alcohol, #1 every single year. But no one gives that a thought. No one gives a thought of like, that's risky. Like, how many people die in car crashes? You know, huge amounts. How many people, you know, die from obesity related or heart disease, liver failure, all these things which are to do with unhealthy lifestyles. These are the things that kill you. Okay? These are the risks: heart disease, liver failure, obesity, alcohol, car crashes, cancer, blah, blah. These are the things that kill you. Sports injuries, sports accidents killing people, they're so insignificant that the risk is what's called de minimis by mathematicians. It's a 0 chance, basically, in your life. So that is not a risk to be worried about. The risk to be worried about are these things, which no one cares about. So what that means is human perception of risk is completely wrong.
It's completely backwards. I totally agree. It's completely backwards.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because, you know, the interesting thing is, though, you can tell them all that. You can sit them down and say, like, here are the stats, and they can go logically, then go, yeah. But it makes no difference to their behavior. So, and this is the thing, is that logically, you know, it doesn't matter. What matters is emotionally, how do they feel about it? And this is the thing, is that people feel emotional about things like parkour because of the visual nature of it, or just how it's put across in the media. And here's a really interesting one that this kind of points out really well. We were doing a course for teachers, and we teach teachers how to bring parkour into schools. That's one of our education programs.
Nice.
So, and it's, you know, the teachers love it or whatever. We were working with a big group of teachers a couple of years back, and we sort of, the first subject we talked to them about is sort of like perception of parkour, and, you know, what do you guys think about it? Do you think it's risky or whatever? And, you know, most people thought, yeah, it's pretty risky, isn't it? Like, you know, what are the chances of, you know, if you don't make a jump, you fall, you get concussed or whatever, and how often does this happen, and blah, blah, blah. And we said, well, yeah, you know, those things could happen. They're very, very rare, but statistically, we can show the stats. That sort of things does happen. So, you know, do you think parkour is more dangerous than the sports you currently play in schools? And they were like, yes. Okay, so does anyone teach rugby here? Is anyone here a rugby teacher? A few hands go up. Okay, so we just pick one of them randomly. So how many concussions did your kids have last term? How many concussions were there in your rugby club, like in your school rugby club last term? And he was like, 4 or 5. Yeah, casual about it. Everyone's casual about it. And we're like, right, we never have any concussions. If we had one concussion, we would be super worried. We'll evaluate all our procedures. We would stop everything we're doing. You have 4 or 5 a term in the space of 8 weeks, and that's normal. And no one here bats an eyelid, right? And the reason is you guys have normalized concussions in rugby. So for you, it's normal. Therefore, no one gets emotional about it.
Perception.
But we would look at that. If we told you we have 4 or 5 concussions in parkour class this term, what would you say? And they'd all be like, oh yeah, we definitely have a problem with that. But it's like, that's just because it's parkour, not rugby. So
yeah, it's the same.
You know, it's solely down to their emotional perception and the cultural perception of like rugby is a sport that's okay because we played it for 100 years. But for us, it's like, no, rugby is statistically way more dangerous than parkour. So is football, so is hockey, so is running. So all these things have a higher injury rate per 1,000 hours of practice than parkour. So, and when they begin to understand that, they're like, oh, okay. And you see them go, because they're teachers, so they do listen to the stats a bit. They're like, right, I kind of get it now.
Yeah.
So, and then
That's
they get into it, they love
awesome.
it, and they introduce it, and it works out fine. But yeah, that's the point. It's like you guys have normalized these things. It's acceptable to be injured. It's acceptable for 80% of all runners worldwide to have injuries, which is what happens every year. 80%. That's acceptable. If 80% of parkour practitioners were injured every year, parkour would be banned everywhere.
Yeah.
Right. But running is totally allowed. No one cares about it, you know, and good. But like there's you see the discrepancy in how you judge one thing and another thing. And it's solely down to emotion and what's culturally normalized and what isn't.
Yeah, that is really, really fascinating. God. Yeah.
So that's the sort of education we've had to do for the last 15 years to get people to go, okay, we understand that one. Then they're happy to let parkour happen.
Yeah, do you know as well, it's amazing you're doing it in schools, because there was a few podcast episodes I was listening to all about sort of neuroplasticity and how incredibly beneficial it is for at any age adults, not only children, to continue to really learn new things, which I know is amazing about parkour, because it's not that, like, you know, of course with any sport you learn it and you have the basics like we said, and then you begin to advance. But with parkour you learn the basics, but then you are literally faced with a new problem with every step you take, because it's a new location, it's a new set of stairs, it's a new surface, a new, you know, a new jump, a new climate, new weather condition. It's crazy the learning skills that are continuously going into parkour, because it's not just jumping and running, is it? It's even navigating. It is, you know, facing your fears, as well as building that strength, and that sort of cardiovascular level of fitness as well. So I think that's amazing about parkour. What have you found with that in the terms of constantly learning? Do you still feel like you're even learning now?
Yeah, I mean, you never stop, because as you say, when you're training parkour, certainly if you're training it kind of in the original sort of the way we would say this, like essential for parkour, which is the training outdoors.
Yeah.
You know, indoor training is also great as well, but you need to also be doing outdoor training. But when you're training in that environment out there, exactly as you say, and you have experienced it, the stimuli are so many and so varied, and they change all the time, that means your brain has to adapt and has far more input, has far more stimuli coming in, you know, and it has to then process all that and find a solution. So and that creates adaptation, and adaptation is what builds health and what keeps your brain growing and developing and keeps your immune system strong and all this sort of stuff. So that, you know, that constant variation of stimuli and is very important in a way. In skill acquisition, there's 2 ways of, they're kind of roughly, you can kind of divide sports, let's say, and probably all skills actually, into 2 categories. So one is sometimes what are called kind skills, and the other side is sometimes known as kind of wicked skills. And the kind skills, for example, or kind sports or whatever, are skills and sports in which there is very limited sources of variation once you start playing. So, for example, golf is a kind sport, right? There's very few sort of things you can do in a way, and there's a stick and a ball, and you have to get in a hole. So it's about becoming, and archery is the same for them. It's about becoming exceedingly good at that one thing. But really, it doesn't really change much. Yes, the courses will change here and there, but basically they're all golf courses, they've all got greens, they've all got putting, and they've got the hole, the same size holes and all that sort of stuff. So, and a lot of sports are like that, but parkour is an example of a wicked skill in that there's no sort of set framework that's always the same. So you constantly have to adapt every time you do it. Whereas golfers don't have to do that so much. So that means that golf, you can pick up, if you do sort of deliberate practice, repetition solely of the hits in golf, the swings, you will get better. As long as you do them in a smart way, you will definitely get better at a pretty good rate. Whereas things like parkour, it's a little bit more complex because there's so much variation. So it's not just a simple case of like, just repeat this hundreds of times and you'll be good at it. It's like, well, yeah, but how does that apply to this? If the outside the curve is here, the angle is here, this has changed, that's changed, it's changed. There's so many things that change that you kind of have to keep working it. So those things are complicated skills to master. There are other examples, like chess, for example, is a relatively kind skill in that there are, again, the variables are very few.
Yeah.
Other than the moves, which are myriad and infinite, the variables are like what each piece is allowed to do. Once you know that, so you can just do it, and the board's the same.
Yeah.
Whereas like something like I don't know, astrophysics is probably wicked, because it's just the science on it's changing all the time.
Yeah.
So you have to keep up with it. Yeah. So that's kind of interesting, and I think that parkour, you need to. It's good. The kind skills are great too. They're always really good to do as well. But you need some wicked skills in your life, because that's what keeps you on your toes, keeps you adapting, keeps you evolving, and that's what keeps you young and curious. So I think parkour is really good for that. Yeah.
I completely agree. And just last question to finish up. In terms of breathing, I know you've talked to me about it a little bit before, but I would love to know how you incorporate a little bit of breathing when you're training parkour, because I think it's absolutely brilliant to even just give people that knowledge, again, of reminding people that even though a sport looks wild and crazy and like something for adrenaline junkies, that actually couldn't be far further from the truth, that actually it's about obtaining this flow state, this calm state, which breathing is massive for, of course.
Yeah, and I mean, as you would know, breathing is one of the most accessible tools every human has to alter their state in a short time. And in parkour, any discipline that requires you to control fear or improve your focus, in a short time, the best tool we have is probably our breathing to do that. So it's an incredibly important thing that we also focus on. We get people to learn and to practice. Once they, to begin with, it'll be very simple, because we don't want to confuse their natural rhythm of breathing. But once they've trained a little bit, we will start to then talk to them about the ideas of vehicle tone breathing or box breathing, and these ideas of like using breathing to calm yourself if you're feeling fear, to center yourself. And doing it in the beginning and ending of training, also to encourage mindfulness as well at the beginning and ending of training. But it's a huge thing, and it's super useful. There's it's a free tool that you always have with you, that you can use within less than a minute to change your state and ease your mind and ease your fear. That once you realize that you've got this thing you can access, and you just need a bit of training to use it, that's super powerful. And I think it would be useful if everyone learned that growing up. If everyone was taught basic breathing skills of how to calm yourself down, you're going to use that everywhere in the world, like job interviews, fighting a war, doing a sport, asking a girl out on a date. If you learn good breathing skill, like, just a minute before you do that thing, it's going to help that become much easier.
Yeah.
So everyone should learn it, I think. Yeah, it's really, really important.
Amazing.
And you can go into great depth, as you have, and made it your discipline, your practice, which is also, and there's huge amount of depth to that too, and that's awesome too. But even if people just learn the surface level stuff, I think that would be very useful.
It's so simple. It's so simple. Yeah. So for someone who's wanting to start parkour, who's listened to this podcast and gone, I want to do that, where do they start? What's the best place to start?
The best place to start is, well, one, have curiosity and enthusiasm for it, because if you're curious enough and you want to learn it, you will find a way and you'll learn it, right? So first of all, think carefully about, like, do I really want to learn it? Am I really like that interested in it? And if you are, then cool, there are places you can learn it. There's find a good teacher or a good guide, which back in my day there were no teachers really, but now there are really good teachers around the world. There are, the ADAPT qualification, which is sort of the global teaching qualification for parkour, has something like 3,500 to 4,000 qualified coaches around the world. So there's plenty of good coaches, plenty of good organizations running classes, clubs, kids and adults. So find them. We do stuff online now, obviously because of COVID, but we have online coaching and online classes people can join in with, and online programming that people can do. But yeah, find a good guide. I think will just save you. You can learn by yourself, but like many of us did back in the day. But learning from a good guide will save you making all the mistakes that we make. So you will learn quicker and more efficiently, and it'll probably be you'll probably get more out of it in a shorter time. So so find a good guide, I would say. And make sure they know what they're doing, because as everything grows, of course, the downside of things growing is that it proliferates, and you do get sort of people kind of jumping on the bandwagon and saying they can do it, saying they can teach it when they really don't have much experience in that. So you've got to check into them a little bit and find out what's this person's sort of pedigree in parkour, who have they trained with, where did they learn, are they qualified? And then that's a key thing. But then once you found a good guide, then it's just a question of your curiosity and your enthusiasm. And the other thing I would say is don't rush. You've got a whole life of training ahead of you, whatever you do. So there's no need to rush into things. And in fact, you'll progress quicker, sort of thing, if you slow down and build good foundations. Then your progress will be more stable. And 100%. That stability will make it faster. Whereas if you rush, you might push too far, you might injure your body, you might wear your body out, and then that stops your progress. And so you end up, it's very much tortoise and hare. Build slow, build foundations, progress that way, and you're more likely to have a long training career, and therefore you're more likely to go further. Don't rush it.
I think that goes with any skill and life in general, actually, that it's like there's no rush. And what I particularly love about parkour is that there's no actual destination. Like you're always running somewhere, but you're not running towards a belt or a medal, or you really are doing it for the journey itself. And well, like you said, to get stronger, to be in service of others and something bigger than yourself, which I think is wicked.
Yes, definitely. And again, you're more likely to stick with it if you do it for those intrinsic motivation reasons, of just like the love of the thing. Then you're more likely to do it forever. Whereas things you do for extrinsic motivation, for medals or awards or points or whatever, or cool factor, as soon as that thing goes away, your motivation has gone. So you stop. So definitely that's the curiosity thing is so important. If you really have that intrinsic motivation to do it, you will do it no matter what. You'll find a way to do it. So it's a self-knowledge thing, I think, to a degree. It's like, what do you want to do is the question you should ask yourself. And the question we normally ask people when they want to join is, do you want to do this? And if you do you want to do these jumps? Do you want to find this within yourself? And if they honestly and sincerely say, yes, this, I really want to do this, then we'll be like, okay, we'll move heaven and earth to make sure you can do it. But we do want them to just check, like, do you really want to do this, or is there something else you prefer to be doing with your time? In which case, definitely do that thing.
Yeah, makes total sense, for sure. Where can people find you in terms of your parkour stuff? Because I know you run a lot of workshops and things like that. So where's the best place for people to find your stuff?
Probably always parkourgenerations.com, the website. That's a kind of central site. We have branches around the world. I'm obviously heavily involved with the London branch, which is where we're based, our headquarters. So parkourgenerationslondon.com is the London branch. You get all the information about classes and events and online coaching there. I have my own website as well, danedwards.com, but it's basically just the blog site with articles and stuff, so don't worry about it. But I'd say, Parkour Generations, the social media channels for the company are pretty big. You can always find us quite easily online, but just typing it in will come up. So
I mean, I'll link it in the show notes as well, and I'll link your Instagram so people can go check your stuff out and just flood your inbox with parkour messages and questions.
I love that. Yes, anytime.
Fab. Well, Dan, it's been such a pleasure to chat to you. It's been really wicked to have you on. Thank you so much.
Me too, George. Yes, thank you very much. And yeah, hopefully we'll get you down for a workshop soon and get more into the breathing.
Yes, absolutely.